What is Sanatana Dharma? Is it a teaching or a philosophy? How is it connected to the day-to-day living? Is it connected in some way to the culture and customs and traditions? And what is this KYC, Know Your Culture series? Let's get into it. Namaskaram. We are restarting the Know Your Culture series. Those of you wondering, what is this restarting? Just a couple of years ago during the lockdown time, I did a few videos on Know Your Culture. Why do we light a lamp? What is the significance and benefits of doing homam, havan and yagna? How does our system and the moon and sun cycles, how do they synchronize? These videos I had made under the topic of Know Your Culture. I had taken findings from research from universities in the West who had researched on these topics. Using these research papers, I had shown how these are beneficial or how they can be beneficial when we follow it in our day-to-day lives. Why did I stop doing these videos? What I realized going down that lane is that only a handful of these cultural practices were researched by these Western scientists. We have hundreds and hundreds of such rituals and practices as a day-to-day living process that they haven't researched. Why do we need the validation of Western science to follow our culture and customs and tradition? Our customs and traditions have been followed for millennia, and that itself is a science. One of the fundamental requirements of a science or scientific experiment and proof is that it has to be repeatable. Under any given controlled condition, it has to be repeatable. Our customs and traditions have been a repeatable process. You do this, this and this, these are the benefits that you will get. Maybe it does not pass through the filters of logical sequencing of how these things work, but definitely it works. The result is something that we have seen for generations together. So it is a science, and I decided let's not go for validation from any other culture. Going forward, we'll be looking at various cultural aspects on a day-to-day basis. What do we follow? It's how do we do it and what are the benefits associated with it. Why did I start making these videos in the first place? That's something that we need to look at. There has been a generational gap in terms of transferring the knowledge of what has been in this ancient land of Bharat to the subsequent generations. When the initial lockdown started and people were discussing what are the ways in which we can protect ourselves, one thing that came up was building our own immunity. One of the things that was suggested by various countries was this, using turmeric, ginger and black pepper. Of course with other herbs, and the way it was used may be different, but the ingredients, these spices, especially turmeric, pepper, black pepper and ginger, have been in usage in our Indian cuisine for generations. That's why post-analysis they discovered that Indians were less prone or less affected because of the natural immunity that was built because of consuming these things as a part of day-to-day life. Today, people are missing it as they move towards cities and towns, and their whole lifestyle and even the food habits, mocking Western food habits, they are moving away from the spices, and hence the drop in immunity. One another research paper was talking about how the coronavirus survives on any metallic surfaces for 10 to 12 hours, but on copper surface it was alive only for 2 hours and then it died. They didn't know the reason, but that was one thing that we always knew in this culture. We stored water in a copper vessel overnight and then we drank it the next day. Even when people go out of their homes and they travel and they come back, a brass or a copper vessel with water was filled and kept outside. They always washed their feet, hands and face before entering the house. These things were inbuilt in our culture. During the month of Pitru Paksha, I was researching about articles of what is this ancestral appeasement is all about. I saw an article which mentioned Stanford University research through which they found that crows and human beings shared the same ancestors millions of years ago. This was something our grandparents always knew. That's why when the crows came, they fed the crows and they said, ancestors visit us in the form of crows. Now, how they told to us may be a little different, but the thing is acknowledging and following it was something that was important. The point is, either we wait for millions of dollars being pumped into the research and then they tell us, yes, this is something significant and we should follow it. Things like intermittent fasting and rhythmic breathing, these were always part of the yogic culture that on Ekadasi days we fast. Pranayama has been in various different forms in this culture. Either we wait for $1 million researches to happen and then we follow this, or we just simply follow it because we have seen the efficacy of these cultural practices. This way of life is Sanatana Dharma to me. Sanatana Dharma is not a philosophy or a teaching. The word Sanatana itself means it was always there. It was always there and it will always be. Are we in tune with it and are we going to live that? That's the only question. Each and every cultural aspect in this land of Bharat have been very closely looked at. These were all designed to enhance an individual's well-being, happiness and prosperity, and designed to lead them towards the ultimate liberation or mukti. Right from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep, how everything needs to be done was suggested in this culture. Not just in a day's time, even in the whole lifetime of a human being, right from birth till the moment of death, how each and everything has to happen. All these things were carefully looked at and suggested in this culture. Whenever I talk about this, about the culture and its significance, and especially when I go into the details of what can be done, elders come to me and they say that, you have to make videos so that my children can watch this and then they can follow it. This cannot become a teaching. You cannot advise this to somebody. You live it, and whatever benefits your children notice in you, they will start following it. Because the way children are, we know that the moment something is told to them, they want to resist, they want to rebel against it. But if they see that you are doing something very dedicatedly and what is the benefits that you are getting out of it, then naturally they will also want to do it. And that's the only way this can happen. We will start with the temple series. I'm sure so many of you have questions regarding temples. What kind of temple should I go to and what should I do in a temple, and how come these temples have become the abode of gods and goddesses. I grew up with all these questions as a child, and I think we owe an explanation before we can encourage the next generation or even this generation to these temples. For those of you who are watching who think this is all superstition or pagan worship or blind faith, before dismissing something so carelessly, you need to understand that this is a civilizational science which has come over many centuries. And before discarding it just like that, you need to just start observing what is in it in this whole science. And those of you who are interested in these grand structures that they have been built, what are the rituals that are happening there, and what are the festivities that happen, keep watching for more exciting content. Namaskara.